So welcome again to our next wonderful interview in our Women in Marketing series, Take Your Seat at the Table. And I'm so delighted to welcome Sarah Aitken today. Sarah is currently CMO of Holler, but she has had a fascinating background, first in PR, then advertising, then with her own consulting business, and now as CMO on the brand side of a very interesting technology startup. She has been an innovator, a trailblazer, and extremely courageous about some of her choices, not only in terms of her initiatives, but also in terms of her career. I expect that you'll enjoy getting to know Sarah a whole bunch. I know I certainly did. First, before we go on, let me take a moment to thank Green Book, our sponsor for this series. And Green Book is a major player in the market research and consumer insight space, sharing resources, serving as a community and a source of information for market researchers everywhere. And I also want to invite everybody, if you are not already an AMA New York member, I'd like to invite you to please join us. At the AMA, not only do you have access to all of our wonderful content, but you also have access to tons and tons of resources, not only from the AMA New York, but also from AMA National, which are very helpful to anybody at any point in their marketing journey, both professionally and in terms of your career. You will also have lots of opportunities to expand your network, not only in major metro New York, but also globally, because we have people who are involved with our community from all around the world. And if you volunteer with us, you will not only have opportunities to do some really good stuff and meet some really great people, but you'll have opportunities to showcase your talents, as well as perhaps develop new talents by getting opportunities in things that you haven't experienced yet. So please consider, if you're not already a member, consider joining us. And some of the wonderful upcoming events that we have is another workshop in our Marketers Toolkit series. And this is part of our content marketing series. Be sure to tune in on May 26th. June 3rd, we have a very exciting talk on the intersection of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. It's a not to miss talk. I encourage you very strongly to tune into that. The speaker is extremely dynamic and exciting and has been a serial entrepreneur. And then finally, part of our career series on June 24th, Advancing Your Marketing Career, something that should be of interest to just about everybody on this call. So if you have any questions about the AMA New York, or volunteering, or would like to become a member, please go to our website at amanewyork.org. You can go to /join in order to become a member, and also to see all of our other resources that are available. You can also email us with any questions at info@amanewyork.org. To start off, let's go back a little bit, Sarah, in your history. You guys may not know yet, but Sarah's not from the US, and you'll discover that immediately. So Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about where you were born and how you were raised? Because that will help us understand you. You know, how did you get to be this wonderful person that you are?
Well, that's very, first of all, let me just say thank you very much for having me. It was certainly a very flattering introduction, and I'm sure as you'll discover, there was more than enough bumps along the road, and I'm hopeful that some of those learnings will be helpful. So I'm obviously from the UK, if anyone is any good at spotting accents. It's probably drifted off a little bit. I've been in the US almost 15 years now, and a fully minted citizen, I'm proud to say. And so my accent is the one thing that has definitely clung on. So yes, I was born and raised in the UK. My family, we grew up just outside of, I grew up just outside of London, in a countryside area called Buckinghamshire. And my mum was a math teacher. My father actually ran his own business as a software company. So technology was somehow ingrained in our DNA as kids growing up, and it was definitely something we were all participating in his business in one way or another. So yeah, I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you so much again, Young Me, for having me. And I think the AMA is such a fantastic organisation, and I was thrilled to be able to participate.
Well, we're very fortunate to have this conversation with you. So, moving on, you've made some interesting pivots in your career from PR to advertising to consulting and now client side CMO. Can you kind of give us an overview of your journey?
Sure. So it actually started out in a sort of embarrassingly lazy way, in a way, because I actually was I interned when I was at university. I met a woman on vacation. I was vacationing in Turkey with my family, and I met this woman on a boat trip, and she was in PR, and I was in my final year of university, and I said, or second year of university, and I said, I'm quite interested in PR and marketing. I'm studying management and marketing, and would you ever need an intern? And she said, yeah, sure. And she was actually working for Arthur Andersen at the time. Now, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember that Arthur Andersen was one of the big 5 accounting firms before it catastrophically disappeared later on. So I interned at Arthur Andersen, and I went in and I worked in the PR department, running events and doing all sorts of stuff as an intern. And she paid me a fortune, what I felt was a fortune when I was in college, to come in and work for 2 or 3 weeks during my vacations from college. And when I was in the middle of my finals, I was literally up late at night studying for my final exams, and she called me up and said, I've left Andersen, and I am now setting up my own PR agency. Would you like to come and be my first employee? This is what I'm going to offer to pay you, which was more than I imagined I would get in an entry-level job. And I was in the middle of my finals, so quite frankly, the idea of looking for a job felt really painful. And she was wonderful. I enjoyed working with her. I enjoyed the work that I had done. And so I just jumped at the chance and said, sure, absolutely. When do you need me to start? And she said, July. And I finished my last exam in June. So I literally walked straight out of university and straight into a job in London, working as the first employee in this small PR agency that she had set up. And the clients that she was working with were all professional services clients. So they were accountants, lawyers, and so on. And we were doing, trying to get them placed in the Financial Times, the Economist, on commentary on TV news, and so on. But there was a component of the business that she had launched, which was helping young professional services companies with their branding. And it was we started to work with an agency externally, a creative agency, who was doing the website and coming up with the logos and kind of building out a website and so on. Bearing in mind this was 2001, so websites were a different concept back then, and a lot more cumbersome and expensive and to build. And so in that moment, it kind of gave me some really good exposure to the creative side of marketing. And it was really clear to me that the PR side wasn't my jam. It was a little bit too salesy, kind of pitching to try to get placement and try to spin stories and so on. And it didn't feel right to me. It wasn't the part of my job I was excited about. And the pieces that I started to become more and more interested in was the branding, the website development, and kind of the sort of creative side. So I left that company. I gave her 6 months notice. She was so wonderful to me to kind of bring me out of college. But I said, you know what, this isn't going to be for me long term. I need to go figure out what is. I also kind of want to take a moment. I want to go travel the world, while I'm young, free, and able to. So I quit my job. I gave her 6 months notice. I moved back in with my mum and dad to save money, and I saved up a bunch of money and threw on a backpack and went off with a friend, traveling the world for a year, which was an awesome experience. And one thing that I'm going to encourage my children to do the same thing. It was learning to operate on no money, to figure your way around. Clearly we were doing that in a time when we didn't have mobile phones, we didn't have anything, any means of connecting. So if I didn't ring my mum and dad to tell them I was still alive once a week, they had no idea what was going on. But I came back from that trip kind of with refreshed energy, and I knew had much more of a clear idea about what I wanted to do. And through that process, I looked very hard at creative agencies and, you know, in the advertising space in London. And that's when I found Iris, which at the time was about 80 people packed into one room in London. It was a young agency. It had only been around a couple of years, but it had been doing really, really well. And it had very much been set up to be the sort of antithesis of the traditional kind of Saatchi and BBDO and BBH and the kind of big agencies that were very dominant in the London ad scene. And what Iris was doing at the time was just much more experiential marketing, much more high touch, much more about brand involvement with people. So it was a lot of experiential, retail, promotional marketing, and early digital work, as that space was starting to kind of emerge to be more significant. And it was a fantastic experience. I came on board. I was working on Sony Ericsson, which at the time was one of the big mobile phone brands. I worked on that brand for 4 years. We took it from way back in the list of handset manufacturers to number one in the UK. And that was at the time when we were launching things like the world's first Walkman phone, which is comical to think about now. But there was a time when you could get 50 tracks on a memory stick and put it in a phone. Launching the first concept of camera phones, so the idea that you could take a picture with your phone, which was obviously completely new and novel at the time. So fantastic experience working with a super innovative, super forward thinking technology brand. Really enabled us as an agency to do some really creative, cutting edge work. Developing new engaging web concepts, understanding sponsorships, how to activate at events, how to bring music into the brand and film and all sorts of other things. It was a great experience. And during that 4 years, the agency went from strength to strength. We went from 80 people up to 300 very, very quickly. So by 2007, the agency was big. It was a big company, and we had a whole lot more process. We had a whole lot more people, many more layers of operations, and we had just started to think about internationalizing. We'd opened an office in New York.
Sarah, before we get into New York, can I interrupt you? Because
sure.
I wanted to ask you, I agree with you about everybody should take a trek when they're still young and do all those kind of loose and free things. Could you share maybe one of the most memorable moments, from that trip, and perhaps how that kind of pointed you in the direction of agency? What stood out? Give us a flavor.
There were so many moments, and most of them probably not appropriate for this environment. 21-year-old or 22-year-old, I guess, roaming around the world with a backpack and a friend. But no, I mean, we went through all sorts of things, and it was a lot of problem solving, right? Like a lot of, we've just landed from a boat in Thailand, and we've come off of here and we've nowhere to stay and everywhere is closed, and where are we going to do? So, it was a lot of, it was great in terms of just maturing very quickly. And learning all of those things. I actually had a job. I took a job. I worked in Sydney for 3 months in Australia, and I worked in the store. I worked in a DKNY shop, funnily enough. And interestingly, one of my very closest friends to this day, I met in that store, and she was from the US. She was from San Francisco, and has since gone on to lead a very successful marketing career in companies like Pepsi and so on. But it was very funny because I think we were both in that environment in sales. We were selling clothes, and so it was kind of figuring out how to inspire Australians to spend a lot of money on Donna Karan suits when literally we had not a penny to rub together between us at the time. So it was we definitely I learned an awful lot during that trip, and had a great it also just exposes you to multiple cultures, you know, and really understanding, you know, how people live. One of the most memorable experiences, I think, was in Fiji. We had wanted to do, you could, in Fiji, you can do what's called homestays. You can go and stay with locals that live in the islands, and we had, again, it cost, you had to pay to do that and blah blah blah, but we happened to be talking to the guy that ran the hostel that we were staying in, and he said, oh, don't pay for it, just go stay with my brother, he's on the next island. And we said, we were like, really, that would be so great, would he mind? They was like, no, totally fine, totally cool, but you know, it's just his house. And it was incredible. And we had to, we weren't allowed to, the customs and cultures, you couldn't expose your legs, and you know, you needed to have your shoulders covered. And you know, we were 21 and backpacking, we had barely anything, so we had to fashion an outfit out of a sarong to cover all of our, make us appropriate for church and the various different things that we were doing with this family. But it was brilliant. You know, it was just one of those experiences where you realize how lucky we are in where we live, and actually how happy people are with very little, and how content and how simple life can be, you know. And I think that was something that was super sort of eye-opening. But it made me very considerate of that there are multiple people in the world, and when you think about marketing, you have to understand everyone and be able to empathize with lots of different perspectives.
One thing that I would love to hear your focus on, because you said something very, very intriguing when we spoke about how when you first came to New York, you were so naive. So tell us, you know, a little bit more about that experience and how that naivete really ended up helping you.
Absolutely. It was interesting, really, because I came to New York. We set up a company here. I loved the fight when Iris was young and growing, you know, and the sort of startup energy, the entrepreneurship, the fact that you kind of had to punch above your weight a little bit before you were necessarily ready as a business. And New York was no different. When I arrived, there were 5 of us, and we were figuring it out. And there was a mix of folks that had been hired locally in New York, who obviously knew the ways of the world and how things worked. And then there were people like me that had come over from the kind of mothership. And my role at the time to build out new business. So go find new business, ideally digital business that would enable us to build a digital practice in New York. So quite honestly, just not really knowing how the New York marketing and advertising sort of scene worked was great in a way, because I think if I'd known any of that at the time, I wouldn't have been so bold to have called up big companies, to have asked for introductions, to have walked in with a pitch presentation that said, you know, we're this thing, we've come over from London, we're doing all this amazing work over there, we can do it for you here, and this is how. And I think, you know, we were sort of pitching these sort of huge ideas to companies that eventually sort of said, okay, well, let's give it a try. And it gave us those moments gave us opportunities to prove ourselves and to expand the business. You know, I think if I had realized that there was this big, you know, pitch process system and how to access different marketers and so on, like, I think I would have potentially attacked it in a more I guess traditional way, and probably had different results, because we would have been a weaker player in a comparative pitch situation.
What was tell us the boldest thing that you did during this period?
With Calvin Klein fragrances, which is one of Coty's big brands. They were launching a new fragrance called CK Into You, which was targeted at 18 to 25-year-olds, really. And we kind of went to them and we said, we know everything there is to know about social media. We can activate this brand on Facebook in a way that will explode. And we sort of promised them a campaign that would essentially connect people on Facebook through this brand. And honestly, it would be so out of every privacy kind of rule that exists now. But at the time, you were able to access people's friends lists. So if you signed up to Facebook and you were a developer, you could actually access people, which has very famously in the last couple of years become a very large problem for Facebook. But at the time, you could access that, and we kind of took this proposal to the Calvin Klein team, and they were like, do you really think you can do that? Like, that's never been done before. And we were like, absolutely, yeah, we can 100% do it. And of course, we had no clue how we were going to do that. And so we had to we won the business, we signed the contract, and then it was like, right, how are we going to do this then? And it was literally a case of finding, and we did it. We pulled it off, and it was really successful. But we did a lot of that, like a lot of kind of pitching these big ideas, because that was the thing that was going to get the business. And then once we had the business, we would figure out how to deliver it. And we didn't fail. We almost failed a couple of times, but we managed to pull it off each time. And we were very fortunate, I think, to just have some really good people who had contacts in the right places. And I used a lot of my old trusted contacts in the UK. Actually, I outsourced to companies who I just knew could do the technical work when we didn't have those resources in house at that point.
That led to you actually transitioning from the account side of the business to management. So tell us about that. You became MD, right?
Because Iris was a small company, a small agency. Agencies typically in a large agency environment, you have various different departments that have various different responsibilities. So account management will manage the client relationships, project management will manage the project, creative development creative strategy will work with the creative team to come up with ideas and so on. Within a startup agency environment, you don't really have all of those layers. So whilst my title was account management, I was really also doing project management. I was doing production. I was doing creative strategy. I was briefing the creative team and managing it and overseeing the production of campaigns. So you wear a lot of hats. As the agency grew and scaled, you start to kind of build out these functions with more specialists into these different buckets of skill sets. And that was exactly what we did as we expanded. And then it came to a point when the guy who was running the agency at the time was leaving, and my assumption was that we were just going to hire somebody new into that role. And at our global CEO, so one of the founders of Iris, kind of came to me and said, I think you should run the agency. It was kind of these sort of moments of, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing. I can run business, I can run accounts, I can help clients with their marketing, all that stuff, got it down. But the sort of running the business, that was all new. But it was one of those moments where I'm like, well, if you think I can do it, maybe I can do it. So it was kind of in.
But what was it about what he had seen in you? Because we don't hear that story that often, where the head of the business will, pluck out a young woman and give them such a big role. So what was it that he saw in you that you didn't see in yourself at that moment?
You'd have to ask him. I think he's still a very big part of my life, and he will always be a mentor to me. And I think one of the trends that my relationship with, his name is Stuart Shanley, my relationship with Stuart has always involved is he is usually ahead of me in terms of what I think I'm capable of. And it's like he's sort of the bug in the back of my head often. Even as recently as this week, and we've been talking about, internally about sort of how things are going to be structured and so on. And it would involve me taking on more responsibility. And my little birdie goes, oh, I don't know how to do that. And then I hear him like tweeting in the other ear saying, why can't you figure it out? So it's like that kind of, I think it's always really, there's again, in terms of advice, finding a mentor that can push you to kind of be uncomfortable is incredible. And there's been multiple moments over the course of my career where he's done that and continues to do that. And sometimes when I know that I'm perhaps doubting myself and my capabilities, to call him up and be like, I need you to kick me in the ass, please. And then he will do that. And it's been really good. And that's, so I think that is another example.
So getting back to management, because that must have been an incredible experience. The agency more than tripled very quickly under your leadership, and and you were still very young and all of that. So tell us more.
I was lucky in many ways in that I took over the leadership of the company at the same time that we won a huge account.
Mhm.
And what that meant was I was taking the agency over at a point of growth. But obviously my job then became to manage that growth, to deliver to the client that we've just won, and resource into it, support, enable, make sure that the people were in the right places, that they were happy, and that our culture maintained as we grew. And none of that stuff is easy, right? As well as, still kind of wearing multiple hats and kind of trying to cover ground that we hadn't gotten the resources for. I remember this moment shortly after we'd won the business, and all of a sudden, when you win a new piece of business, clients want everything at once. You've pitched this great story and it's like, okay, cool, now we have to make everything happen at once, and we haven't quite had time to hire all the right people into all the right places. There was a moment we were putting together a website for I think it was one of Becky's brands, it's like Supercol or something like that. And literally we were on the way to the meeting to present wireframes for a website that we were going to build for them, and literally I was making the wireframes in PowerPoint because I have on the way to the meeting in the taxi. So like it was sort of one of those, again, like we were a bit fake it till you make it kind of moment, and of course, we had hiring recs out for UX designers and all this stuff. We just didn't have the boots on the ground, and we needed to get the work done. So it was a case of just, again, like, sort of figuring it out. Grew really rapidly. And I think one of the big things that moments of in that experience, I'd probably been running the agency about 6 months, and it was in that period of time I happened to a very good friend of mine ran the Ace Hotel in London, and he was actually in New York interviewing for that job, and he and I went for dinner, and I was talking to him about my experience and the things I was struggling with, and how going from being promoted into the leadership role in the company, the buck stopped at me really, and having above people who had considered themselves either more senior to me or certainly equivalent, I was finding quite difficult to kind of earn their respect and earn their have them respect my direction in many ways as well, and authority, and that was something that I was finding a little tricky. And he was also a young leader, had actually gone into hotel management, never went to college, just went straight into hotel management. And he talked to me in that over dinner, and he was like, I actually got some executive coaching and it was really good, like maybe you should have a look at that. And I was like, never heard of that before, like let me check it out. And so I did a little bit of research and figured out that actually maybe this was the way I saw it at the time was like, maybe this is a great shortcut to kind of get 5 years worth of leadership experience I don't have, and get it quickly. So I pitched the idea to my global CEO and said, would you guys be open to like paying for some executive coaching for me? And he was like, absolutely, great, like let's do it. So he was like, and I'll one better you, I'll go out and find you a couple of coaches to pick from. I was like, awesome. So off he went, and he went to find, and he shortlisted it down to 2 coaches, and they came in to meet us. And he was like, which one did you prefer? And both were based in New York, but one was actually British and one was from New York. And the British woman was lovely, but I felt like I was going to get cuddled on the couch, whereas with the American, even in our first interview, she made me so uncomfortable. She just dug straight into the meat of it straight away, made me feel really weird and awkward. And I was like, she's going to make me better. I know she's going to do it. She's going to make me better. So I went to him and said, I want to go with Trisha. And he was like, oh, that's interesting you say you picked her, because I'm actually going to get coached by her too. This is our kind of global CEO who, like, through this like journey of executive coaching, is like, you know what, actually I've never been executive coach. I founded this business in my 20s. I'm now like in my 40s, and I could probably be a better leader with some guidance. So he and I both then kind of went through the program sort of together. It was individual coaching, but which was great because we got to kind of like, oh, have you done this part about such and such? We got to kind of go through the experience a bit in parallel, which was quite fun. But it was honestly one of the most kind of game-changing experiences that I've had professionally, and even impacted my personal life in a pretty meaningful way as well.
Tell us a little bit more about what how you blossomed under that coach. What were some of the big ahas, and How did that begin to form your leadership?
It was interesting because a lot of that coaching experience was much more about you are the only thing you're in control of is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to kind of lose this concept that you're in control of all these other people and all these other things around you, because you're not. But what you are in control of is your like how you interact with those things, and the impact that that can have on other people and experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think I still use that today with folks that I mentor. But it's a very simple concept. It's this idea that there's all this stuff going on a court. You know, there's a game of tennis being played that's going back and forth and whatever, and you're in the stands commenting on what's happening down there. And it's like, really, are you going to be able to, you can't really affect the result by just standing and watching and complaining or talking about the thing that's happening down there. The only way you can make any impact on what's actually going on is to get on the court, grab a racket and hit a ball. The only thing that you are in control of is yourself, your words and your actions, and thinking about how that impacts other people, and how what you want to achieve, and how you can best use your words and your impact and your actions to do those things. One thing that I really, and not all of her advice I liked, like for sure. There was definitely things that, you know, I was like, oh, that sounds, I would never do that. I would never speak to someone like that, or I would never. But she would always say, like, try it, just try it this week. Come back to me and tell me how it went. Which is like, and it's fine, by the way, if you try it and you hate it and, you know, it's like not for you. And there were a couple of things that were like that. Well, there was one piece of advice I was really resistant to, that she came down with, and what, because one of the sort of going in problems was, I need people who are around me who are potentially more senior than me, have a lot more experience than me, to take my direction and see me as a leader. You know, these are people that had worked with me for years and, you know, had seen me as X and now I was Y, and they were like, couldn't quite kind of make the adjustment. And so one of the comments or issues she raised was what I was wearing and how I was presenting myself. And, you know, we were an agency, we were a creative company, so it's very casual. There was not, you know, a lot of, you know, people were, you know, in shorts and flip-flops in the summertime. You know, there was no real, you know, dress code, so to speak. And, you know, our global CEOs and creative directors would roll around in ripped jeans and whatnot. You know, no one would bat an eyelid. And so I hadn't changed my style at all. It was just, I was wearing what I was wearing. I was someone in my 30s in New York, and that's what that was the style. The way she presented it was you need to smarten up your look. And I said, well, that seems really like a sexist sort of thing. Like, why should I have to smarten up my look? Like, my CEOs don't have a problem with authority, and they wear jeans and shorts and flip-flops. Like, how does that, why should I have to do it? That feels really wrong. And I got really like kind of angry about it, and kind of felt, and she just said, listen, you're a woman, first of all, you're young, second of all, and 3, you're short. And I was like, oh wow, ouch. Like, it was like this sort of, oh my gosh, okay, well, that's a little rude, but not inaccurate at all. But and she said to me, she was like, listen, people, no matter what you think the world order should be, there is a way the world order is. And you have to accept that and figure out how you operate within it. And I was like, okay. And so she said, listen, I don't need you to change your style. You do not need to go in, buy a suit and a pantsuit and a button-up shirt. You're at an agency, but go buy yourself some expensive pieces, or at least expensive looking. Mix it in with your wardrobe, you know. So it was the difference between, you know, ripped jeans and flip-flops and a scruffy t-shirt, to ripped jeans, a pair of heels, a white t-shirt, a white t-shirt and a leather jacket over the top. So it was like styling up, basically, and sort of essentially kind of bringing more of a sort of stance to how I was dressing and presenting myself. And I really resisted it for weeks and weeks. And she would say, have you thought about it? Have you been to the shops? And I was like, oh, no. And eventually I talked to a friend who said, oh, come on, this will be fun, we'll go shopping. Did it, and it was just so fascinating, the reaction change. And I couldn't change anything. I literally changed what I was wearing, and I put on some heels so I stood a bit differently, and started to kind of just come into the office dressed differently and presenting myself differently, and started to realize it was making me behave differently. two.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really bizarre because it wasn't something that, and it's even something that I could think about today. And even in this Zoom world, I've been very, like, I get dressed, like, come to work and I leave my bedroom and I walk to the office and I sit down but I'm dressed, and like I put makeup on and all that to kind of be more in the mindset and feel like a leader and feel like I'm kind of part of the process. And maybe that's something that, I don't know, maybe that will go away at some point, as a reality of the world, but
I don't think so.
or
We're
maybe it
human
won't.
beings. Yeah, unfortunately, we're human beings with all of that, that comes with it. But
Exactly.
so Sarah, when this changed, I mean, how did that change, your relationship with these older, more experienced people? And I can't imagine that was the only thing. So
No.
so what else did you bring to the table to earn their respect and command their, use your authority?
Yeah, it was a lot of the coaching was super helpful because she would actually focus on specific issues that I was having with specific people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a lot about, in some cases, I would change the format of how I was meeting with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot about common goal creation. So one of the things that I learned was that it wasn't about me giving them direction. I needed them to feel like it was their goal that they had set for themselves, that they were excited to move towards, and I was simply there to support.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it was, we during that period of time, I took the whole leadership team off site for a day and we brainstormed and we worked through, like, what is it that we need to focus on as a company? Where are we weak? Where are we strong? And kind of were a bit more objective about it, and then came out of that session with everyone having like really clear goals that everyone was signed up to, that was, lead us to the right place. And then it became much more about giving those folks, these are your goals, you wrote them, like, off you go, kind of thing. And like, I'm here to support and enable, provide resources, make sure you've got the right budget and the right folks around to help you make that happen. So it changed the dynamic quite a bit, because it became, instead of me trying to sort of be the only person who was setting the vision, like actually bringing everyone else into that process and making it our vision instead of mine, made a huge difference, because it felt much more like a leadership team then, than folks who were executing against someone else's ideas.
Yeah. Yep, that's wonderful. Now, I just want to make a comment to the audience. I want to leave the last few minutes for audience questions, but there's so much more I want to ask you, Sarah. So you became a great leader. Agency was thriving, and I know you took another shift, but I want to speed forward. So if you can just take us from your shift from MD into a more regional role, and then how you shifted from that different experience, that was a vastly different experience again, into deciding to do your own consulting.
Well, this is definitely a shorter piece of the story, I think. The shift from MD, again, maybe unsurprisingly, but also triggered by the same leader who was, I kind of felt very strongly that I was like, yeah, the agency's grown and we're in a good place, but I want to take it to here. I had this big vision. We're going to be like this great big thing. And he was like, yeah, no, you've mastered that whole like MD thing now. Like, now the big problem we have as a business is getting new business and getting that across all of our agencies in North America and Latin America as well. We've kind of expanded. By this point, the agency is blown up all over the world. We're in 14 different places. And so I was like, okay, well, he was like, so what would you do if it was up to you? How would you reinvent how we're doing new business? So I like sat down and wrote out a kind of strategy and a plan, and said, this is what I would do, this is how I would resource it. This is what I would, this is how I go about it. And he was like, okay, great. I want you doing that in like 2 weeks. We'll hire a new MD and we'll get you, moved into that role. So I was like, oh, okay. So it was like handing over my baby that I'd made over like 3.5 years to someone else. And then taking on this new role. And obviously it was very different, because I went from managing, 100 people to literally 2. I had an assistant and a new business assistant, and I hired somebody to manage PR and communications. And so it was a very different, and it was a lot more cross-functional management, working with other agency leaders and helping and trying to make sure that this resource that they were essentially kind of paying for was valuable to them. So it was a very different piece. But what it did do for me was, after 3.5 years of really being more of a general manager, and less of a marketer, actually, what it did do is it got me back into marketing again. Doing new business meant I was pitching clients. It meant I was listening to their problems. It was helping them figure out what the answer to their problems was going to be, what the creative solution to that problem was going to be, working with the creative team to come up with ideas, pitching those ideas. You know, it got me back into the world of like, I was like, yeah, this is what I love to do. You know, this is the place where I'm happy. This is like working with brands, working with, coming up with ideas, figuring out, digging around for insights around how consumer behavior, and then finding brilliant ways that excites people around a product or a service. So through that role, so I did that role for a few years, and it was great. And I had awesome experience working in Brazil and other parts of the world as well, learning about marketing that way. We bought a B2B agency, so I got to learn a whole bunch about how great B2B marketing gets done. So it was a great experience. But having had that kind of enlightenment of like, okay, yeah, actually this sort of general management of running a business is less interesting to me than the marketing component. How can I get more of that? Alongside, when I was in the CMO role, I started, and it really was just organic, but I started to consult a bit on the side with mostly young startup companies. It was largely begun with friends calling me up to say, oh, my friend so-and-so has this ice cream business in Austin, and they need to rebrand, and he doesn't know how to go about it. Can you help him? You know, and so I worked with this company, Nadamu, at the time, helped them like find a little agency, helped them rebrand, helped him kind of figure out how to think about their brand identity and so on. Worked with another startup. So there was a few. I ended up with like a little book of these sort of startups that I was kind of consulting with on the side. And it was so fun. It like didn't feel like work to me. It was just really engaging and interesting work. So I actually fell pregnant and got married, fell pregnant. I kind of had that moment of kind of like, okay, well, the agency had actually also been acquired. At that point, we were on a 5-year earn out. So actually the maternity leave and pregnancy gave me a kind of nice opportunity to make a graceful exit from Iris. I was very clear that I didn't want to work for the company once the acquisition was complete. The new owners weren't going to be the right company for me to thrive within, I didn't think. And so, it was kind of a recognized time for change. And, having been with the company for a very, very long time, I decided to sort of make that exit, thinking that I was like, my strategy was, I'll go straight into, I want to go client side. I want to go to a mission driven young brand that I have a huge heart for, and I want to build the brand from the inside. And I thought I was going to be in that role within 3 months of whenever I decided to start looking after my sort of maternity leave was over. So I had a very clear picture of what I wanted, and I went out into the market and I said, I'm ready, right? This is what I want to do. This is the experience I've got. And literally nobody wanted to hire me. I would sometimes get into interviews and get to a point of like, we really like you, but actually we're going to hire this person that's done the exact same thing at our competitor, or we're going to hire this person who's. Nobody wanted to take a punt on somebody who hadn't been client side before. My whole career I'd been agency side. So, and it came again and again and again. I lost job after job after job after job. And I was so down on myself. My confidence was in the toilet. I was just like, I just came out thinking like everything had always gone my way pretty much. Like I'd been given opportunity after opportunity. I had this mentor who had such confidence in me. And then I was out in this marketplace and nobody wanted to know. It was a completely different experience. And I didn't really know what to do about it. And in that process of my kind of strategy was very much about network with everyone, drink a ton of coffee, meet as many people as I could, get connected with folks and apply for jobs and do all that. And it was, probably a good like 6 months had gone by, and through the networking experience, one company that I've been talking to was kind of like, we're not ready to hire someone, but we really, really need this brand strategy piece done. Could you help us with that on a consultancy basis? I was like, great, sure. So that begun my kind of consultancy business. so I took on a couple of projects, and then a couple more and a couple more. And so over time, I ended up juggling a few different clients. And it was great. And it was actually really, it was, again, I'd gotten back to doing my marketing stuff. I was still applying for full-time stuff as well, and still not getting anywhere, quite frankly. But what the consultancy experience did was it actually improved my resume. It got my resume to a point where people could believe that I could do the client side thing because I was doing it as a consultant. And I did that for about a year. In that year, fell pregnant with my second child, and essentially came out of was continuing to consult. And as I was getting more and more pregnant, I was realizing I was having almost at the point of getting less and less chance of getting a full-time role, because the closer you get to having a baby, as many people would say, they would of course hire anybody, no matter what. Really, if you're a business and you're trying to hire someone, the last thing you want to do is hire someone who's around for a month and then disappears. Which again, it's really tricky, because as a woman, you kind of go, you want to be able to support that kind of experience. But if you're a young company and you're growing, like as a business leader, I recognize that that's challenging as a concept. To bring someone on and then know that they're going to be gone for at least 3 months. Realizing that, I was kind of like, right, I'm just going to double down on consulting. This is just what it's going to be for the time being. And like, while I've got young kids, great, it gives me the flexibility and all of that. It was in that consultancy experience that I met Holler, and I met them as a consultant. Actually, I started with them they started as one of my clients. It was a company called Emoji at the time. I met with them, and within 5 minutes of them explaining the vision of the company, I was like, why are you called Emoji? That makes no sense. This company is a huge technology concept that doesn't exist today, and you're called Emoji with a bunch of silly looking stickers. Like, this seems crazy. And so I came on board actually and rebranded the business, and we did that in like 3 months. And it was about 6 weeks into that experience, they were like, can you come back full time after you've had this kid? We need someone who can kind of run marketing. So that's really been where I've now got to. And actually, in the end, as much as it was a longer process than I imagined, naively imagined, I think, to get that role, it ticked all the boxes. It was the young company, it was mission driven, it was innovative, and I had the opportunity to build the brand from the inside. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I want to get to audience questions are coming in, and unfortunately we're not going to have time to get to all of them, but I want to get to a couple. But before we do that, in 2 minutes or less, can you tell us why you love Holler? What makes Holler special?
It's literally, I'll tell you very quickly, it is literally inventing a new category of media. This concept of conversational media, so the media that exists in peer-to-peer messages, we're literally innovating all around that, and it's super exciting.
So everybody needs to learn more about this. And, from start to beginning, from start to end, not to beginning, Sarah has proven herself to be, a groundbreaker, an innovator, very, very exciting. I wish we had another hour to go into more, but let's go to a couple of questions from the audience. And so Kelsey Sleeper wants to know, what is your advice for professional young mothers?
My advice is simple. Have an amazing partner, one. That is, or just an amazing support system, whatever that might be for you. I don't think that this concept that you can do all of the things and all of the things well, I think we've all learned that as mothers through the COVID experience, when childcare is removed and you have to do everything at once, like it's physically impossible. So accept that for one, and then build a support system that works for you. I think that we're a 2-career family, and that has its challenges because we're constantly juggling and competing for time, and I set, when I first started working with Holler, I set very clear boundaries. My hours were 9 to 5. That was it. That was when you were going to get me, and you'll get all of me between 9 and 5. You'll get none of me after that. My kids get all of me afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was like kind of how I've operated. And when you set clear boundaries and you don't bend on them, no, everybody respects them.
That's
And you can be efficient in that time.
wonderful. And Corinne Carabas wants to know, what advice would you give to someone trying to elevate from an admin entry-level role into management? Any tools, hard or soft skills, resume points that might help them stand out?
Honestly, I think the biggest advice I would say is try to find ways to add value.
Mm-hmm.
I think like whenever you're in whatever role or opportunity you have, you know, if you come in and do what's expected of you, then that's great, but that will keep you where you are. If you want to stretch above and want to grow, you know, find ways, volunteer to be on a task force about something. Give yourself exposure to leadership in some way. You know, offer to come up with an idea and offer to help, or see something that's going on and ask to be on the team. You know, those are the kinds of things that help you get experience quickly that may not be part of your current job description, and B, gives you exposure to the folks that really can push your career forward.
An answer. And I want to share, Leslie Kendrick shared something that I want to share with the audience as we close this interview. You know, so sad about that, but I sent this to answer her same question. Get a leadership role in your AMA chapter as a volunteer. I've done this in Baltimore, and a friend worked his way up to AMA Baltimore president as one of the youngest presidents ever, supervising 15 people on our board, implementing some very creative initiatives. He actually stayed in the role for 3 years, which is very unusual in the AMA. And he kept on getting promoted at work into leadership roles. So
Very cool.
you know, so please, this brings us back to what I've encouraged. Come join AMA New York. And Sarah, thank you so much for your time. This has been
for having me.
You have so many wonderful experiences to share, and I'm sure people will want to learn more. Where can they go to learn more about you and about Holler and more about your courage and, you know, trailblazing attitude?
So holler.io, if you want to find out a bit more about Holler, there's lots of stuff on there, all sorts of stuff around conversational media, what that means. Best place to find me is LinkedIn. Sarah J. Aitken NYC, I think, is my handle. So for sure, come find me there.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody in the audience for joining us. I look forward to seeing you again and hope that's very soon. So bye-bye. Have a wonderful day, rest of your week, and see you at our next event. Bye-bye.
Bye.